Hi there. In our final lecture for our first section, I want to introduce to you an important religion in India, the third most common religion in India, Sikhism. And I also want to take some time to talk about contemporary iconography of Hinduism. Sikhism has been around since the Mughal dynasty for about 550 years now, and it is prominently found in the north of India, and especially along the border between what is Pakistan and India in a region called the Punjab. There are about 20 million Sikhs in India, which is only about 1.5% of the population. Actually, the largest population of Sikhs by percentage of total population can be found in Canada. Sikhs have been persecuted in India for many centuries, and so they can be found in large communities all over the world. Sikhs, often you can see them in India or in the Punjab area wearing large turbans, and they have large beards and very long hair, which they bind up in their turbans. They have a religion which dates back to Guru Nanak Dev, who really brings together many of these sort of ideas of Hinduism and Islam in a way. It's a monotheistic faith, similar to Islam, but it doesn't also, like Islam, does not recognize the idea of caste. Unlike Islam, does not have an iconoclastic tradition, one that prohibits images of things that are alive. But like Hinduism, it believes in karma, but not incarnation, the idea of avatars. Sikhs came to the defense of Hindus that were being persecuted by Muslim Mughals, and they have a very strong tradition of self-reliance, hard work, and community. One of the ways in which you might recognize a Sikh, aside from a large turban, which they may or may not wear, is what's often referred to as the 5 Ks. These are the kesh, uncut hair, the kanga, wooden comb for the hair, the kara, an iron bracelet, kachera, a cotton undergarment, and a kirpan, an iron dagger. So sometimes these daggers might be small things, sometimes they can be quite large, but the Sikhs are traditionally the only people who have the religious right to carry a dagger with them, even on an airplane. The tradition of the gurus were the sort of sacred leaders of the Sikhs for many centuries. But as the Sikhs were being persecuted, many of their leaders died by assassination. Finally, the last of the Sikhs passed the tradition on to the text itself. So there is no spiritual leader per se. There is, in fact, the teachings of these spiritual leaders, these first 10, that has been enshrined in this text, the Guru Granth Sahib Nisan, which is now treated and honored as if it were a teacher. And each day it is brought out of a special chamber and enshrined in the Golden Temple, and every day, at the end of the day, it is ceremonially returned back to its resting place, treated with the kind of honor and respect they would of a spiritual leader. As I mentioned, the Golden Temple, this is a kind of spiritual homeland of the Sikhs. It is a really spectacular temple surrounded by a pool where people, the Sikhs, come to bathe, and it has this sort of gangway out to this gold-gilt temple, which has many of the sort of architectural features of the Mughal dynasty. Here you can see the kind of gangway. It's always a very crowded passageway out there where Sikhs come each day to come and pray before the sacred book of the Sikhs in Amritsar. If you look closely at the Golden Temple, you will see it also, like the Taj Mahal, it has this sort of inlaid pietra dura, that sort of hard white marble inlaid with semi-precious stones, or this way in which they can create designs. But unlike the Taj Mahal, the Golden Temple actually has much more specific images of living things, such as birds and flowers. Another remarkable thing you see all around the Golden Temple and the gangway are these plaques that are inscribed in the floors around the temple, thousands of them in many different languages of Sikh communities from all over the world, which are lending their support back to their home temple in Amritsar. There's a very strong, compelling sense of community, and people sign up to volunteer at the Golden Temple to provide food for free for anyone, regardless of their faith or ethnicity, to come and feed this wonderful complete meal. And this is called the langar. There's a waiting list for 3 years long for people to come and volunteer. And there's a great sense of cheer and community as the men and women here are washing the dishes and preparing the food and serving it to anyone who happens to show up. There was an extraordinary feeling of love and compassion when I had the opportunity to visit Amritsar and sit and have a meal in their langar. There was an incredible pride they had that they could feed anyone and everyone who came to their doors. And this is true of any temple anywhere in the world. And it's something that the Sikhs maintain as a very important part of their religion, is to provide for the larger community with this tremendous generosity. Hindu temples today in India. So the culture of India has gone through quite a number of changes in the last few hundred years, and new ideas about religious faith have promulgated. We see in Hinduism a willingness to accept and adopt a lot of new things. Hinduism has, in one way, strived to become more uniform and create a kind of ideology that it didn't have. It was always very sort of open-ended, and that people could become Hindu in a sense, or identify as Hindu, believing in a whole host of different possible ideologies. We see this in the Sri Durgyana Tirath, a temple also in Amritsar. It looks nearly identical to the Sikh Golden Temple in the same city. We see the golden top, the white marble with the pietra dura. And as you come up closely, you can actually see now images of Hindu deities, Rama, Lakshmana, Sita, Krishna, and the gopis, all this sort of classic Hindu iconography sort of overlaid in this sort of homage to the Sikh Golden Temple. And this is what I have found, is that there's this kind of willingness in all the religions here to try and find ways to accommodate and make people feel welcome. Take something that may be familiar elsewhere or popular elsewhere and infuse that in the new ideas of what it means to be Hindu. We see a transformation in Hindu iconography the last few hundred years. A traditional mask of the avatar Narasimha, an incarnation of the god Vishnu, has transformed from this very stylized, bold, simple forms to something much more realistic, inspired by sort of popular European images and prints. These new images you see, the contemporary poster of Narasimha, are much more realistic, much more brilliantly colored, and really graphically violent images of the way Narasimha is destroying the tyrant. All across India, in the temples, you also see statues becoming more realistic, even as they maintain this idea of multiple arms and multiple heads. We can also see a much more greater naturalism in the features of the face, and the physicality of the bodies are presenting things much more realistically in the drapery and the character of the figures. Here is a very important Hindu temple in the city of New Delhi that was built in the 1930s. In this temple, you can see new construction techniques, but it's still modeled on the idea of the northern style temple, the Nagara style, with its tall towers and bold amalakas or cresting stones at the top. You notice at the front gate here, going up, very prominently in the front of the temple, are a pair of swastikas right there on the front of the temple. This temple, being built in the 1930s, clearly was in response to a rise in fascism in Germany, which had co-opted this ancient symbol of the swastika from Hinduism and Buddhism from thousands of years back in India. And I can imagine their desire to put that on their temple was a sense of claiming it as their own and rejecting the ideology of fascism, that inherently the swastika is not something of a kind of poisonous fascist ideology, but is in fact a part of the sort of symbols of life and regeneration that are important ideas in Hinduism. At night, the Lakshminarayan Hindu temple is all alight, and this is a kind of the way in which new technologies come in to introduce a kind of festive, spectacular qualities that you now see a great deal in Hindu temples all across India. Let's have our review quiz. Question 1. Where are there a majority of Sikhs in India? Question 2. Who is the religious leader of the Sikhs today? Question 3. How is the Golden Temple similar and different from the Taj Mahal? Question 4. Why did the Hindu temple Sri Durgyana Tirtha adopt the style of the Sikh Golden Temple? How have Hindu temples and religious icons changed in modern times?